Most people want to be liked. You want to be remembered. Fear is not cruelty, it's clarity. It's walking with so much certainty that no one questions you, not because they agree, but because they know resistance is pointless. In this message, I'll teach you how to sharpen your mind, refine your energy, and radiate silent authority. Because when they fear losing your respect, they follow your lead. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us where are you watching from? Fear isn't about threat, it's about presence. Most mistake fear for brutality, for the crude wielding of force that makes lesser men tremble. But true fear? It's far more refined. It's the silence that falls when you enter a room, the straightening of spines when your footsteps echo down a corridor, the sudden attention that grips every soul when you simply raise your hand. I have commanded armies, conquered nations, and built an empire that shook the foundations of Europe. But not once did I need to raise my voice to instill fear. The greatest fear comes not from shouting, but from the quiet certainty that your words carry weight, that your decisions are final. You see, fear is respect's older, wiser brother. When people fear you, they don't just follow orders, they anticipate them. They don't merely listen to your words, they study them. They don't simply acknowledge your presence, they feel it in their bones. But here's what most don't understand about fear. It's not about making threats, it's about becoming inevitable. When I moved across Europe, my enemies didn't fear my army as much as they feared the certainty of my advance. They knew that once I set my sights on an objective, retreat was not in my vocabulary. True fear is psychological. It's the knowledge that you cannot be swayed, bought, or manipulated. It's the understanding that your will is as immovable as the mountains and your vision as unstoppable as the tide. When you embody this level of certainty, people don't fear what you might do to them. They fear failing to meet your standards. I've seen generals with twice my experience hesitate in my presence, not because I threatened them, but because they knew I accepted nothing less than excellence. The fear of disappointing someone of unwavering standards is far more potent than the fear of punishment. Let me tell you something about the nature of fear that few understand. It's contagious. When one person truly fears you, not your position, not your resources, but you, others begin to feel it too. They may not know why, but they sense something different about you, the way you move, the way you observe, the way you decide without hesitation. But here's what separates true fear from common intimidation. True fear breeds respect. When people fear you properly, they don't cower, they aspire. They don't run, they rise to meet your expectations. Because the kind of fear I'm teaching you to cultivate isn't about domination, it's about elevation. Think about the mentor whose disappointment you dreaded more than any punishment. Think about the leader whose silence spoke louder than others. Shouts, that's the kind of fear you must learn to command. It's not fear of what you might do, it's fear of not being worthy of what you represent. To be feared is to be consistent, unwavering, uncompromising in your standards. It means making decisions with such clarity that others doubt their own objections. It means carrying yourself with such certainty that your confidence becomes contagious and your doubt becomes unthinkable. Remember this: fear is not a weapon to be wielded. It's an aura to be cultivated. It's not about creating terror. It's about embodying excellence with such intensity that anything less feels like failure to those around you. This is the first lesson in becoming someone others fear. Understand that true fear is not about violence or threat. It's about becoming a living, breathing standard that others measure themselves against. When you walk into a room, people shouldn't fear what you might do to them. They should fear not rising to the occasion of your presence. You can be liked or you can be respected, rarely both. Let me share a truth that most will never have the courage to accept. The pursuit of popularity is the death of power. I've watched countless leaders fall because they couldn't resist the sweet poison of being liked. They compromised, their vision for applause, traded their authority for approval, and in the end, lost both. When I took command of the Army of Italy, I was younger than most of my generals. They didn't like me, they didn't want to like me, and that's exactly why I succeeded. I didn't waste a single moment trying to win their friendship. Instead, I showed them something far more valuable. Results. Here's what most people don't understand. About leadership. Every attempt to be liked is a small surrender of power. Every joke to seem approachable. Every compromise to seem reasonable. Every concession to seem fair. These are all threads being pulled from the fabric of your authority. Think about the leaders you truly respect, not the ones you enjoy being around, but the ones who changed you, the ones who pushed you beyond your limits, the ones who saw in you what you couldn't see in yourself. Did they achieve that by trying to be your friend? No, they achieved it by being uncompromising in their standards. I've seen it countless times on the battlefield and in the courts of Europe. The moment a leader starts seeking approval, they've already lost. Their decisions become weaker, their vision becomes clouded, and their impact becomes diluted. They trade the sharp edge of excellence for the dull comfort of acceptance. But let me ask you this. When you're building something extraordinary, when you're pursuing a vision that others can't even comprehend, do you have the luxury of being liked? When you're pushing people beyond their perceived limits, when you're demanding excellence in every detail, should you expect to be popular? The great tragedy of modern leadership is this desperate pursuit of likability. Leaders poll their decisions, water down their visions, and soften their standards, all in the name of being liked. But history isn't written by the liked. It's written by the respected. When I reorganized France, established the civil code, and reformed education, do you think I worried about being liked? I worried about being right. I worried about being effective. I worried about creating systems that would outlive me. And they did, because I chose impact over popularity. Here's the reality that most won't tell you. The more transformative your vision, the less likely you are to be liked. Real change, real impact, real leadership. These things disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. They create resistance. They create friction. They create growth. The choice between being liked and being respected is made in small moments. It's made when you hold someone accountable instead of letting it slide. It's made when you give honest feedback instead of empty praise. It's made when you stand firm on your standards instead of bending to keep the peace. I'll tell you what I told my officers. I don't need your friendship. I need your excellence. I don't need your approval. I need your commitment. I don't need you to like me. I need you to trust that I will lead you to victory. This is the fundamental choice you must make. Do you want to be the leader people enjoy having drinks with, or the leader people thank years later for transforming their lives? Do you want to be the pleasant memory they soon forget, or the challenging force that made them grow? Remember this, being liked is temporary. Being respected is permanent. Being liked might make your days easier, but being respected will make your impact eternal. Choose wisely, because this choice will define not just who you are, but what you're capable of achieving. If you hesitate, they dominate. Let me tell you about the Battle of Austerlitz. 3 emperors on one battlefield, the fate of Europe hanging in the balance. Do you know what made the difference between victory and defeat that day? It wasn't the size of our armies. It wasn't our strategy, though it was superior. It was certainty. While my opponents debated, discussed, and deliberated, I acted. While they sought consensus, I seized opportunity. This is the first principle of power. You must understand hesitation is death. Not just in battle, but in every arena of life where power is contested. I've watched men with superior resources, better positions, and stronger allies lose everything because they couldn't embrace the power of absolute certainty. They second-guessed themselves. They waited for perfect conditions. They sought validation from others, and in doing so, they surrendered their power before the battle even began. Here's what most people don't understand about certainty. It's not about being right. It's about being committed. When I made decisions, I made them completely. No half measures, no backup plans that invited doubt. When I committed to a course of action, every fiber of my being aligned with that decision. Think about the energy you project when you're uncertain, the subtle hints in your voice, the slight hesitation in your movements, the way your eyes search for approval or validation. These are not mere details. They are broadcasts of weakness that others can sense instinctively. But when you move with certainty, everything changes. Your voice carries weight without forcing it. Your movements become deliberate, purposeful. Your eyes hold steady, unquestioning. This is the presence that commands respect. This is the energy that makes others pause. Let me share something I observed countless times in the courts of Europe. The most powerful person in any room isn't the one with the most valid argument. It's the one with the most unshakable certainty. When you speak with absolute conviction, you change the reality of those around you. Most people think certainty comes from having all the answers. They're wrong. Certainty comes from trusting. Your ability to handle whatever consequences arise from your decisions. When I led my armies across the Alps, a move many considered impossible, I wasn't certain of success. I was certain of my ability to adapt, overcome, and find a way forward, no matter what challenges we encountered. This is what separates those who command fear from those who inspire pity. The ability to act decisively, even in the face of incomplete information. You will never have all the answers. You will never have perfect conditions. The moment you accept this is the moment you begin to cultivate true power. But here's what they don't teach you about certainty. It must be trained like any other skill. Start with small decisions. Make them quickly. Commit to them fully. Don't waste energy second-guessing or explaining. Let the results speak for themselves. When you begin to embrace certainty, you'll notice something remarkable. Others will start bringing you clearer options, better information, more decisive recommendations. Why? Because certainty is contagious. When you refuse to entertain doubt, others learn to come to you with clarity. I'll tell you what I told my generals before every major campaign. Doubt is a luxury we cannot afford. When you're leading, whether it's an army, a business, or your own life, every moment of hesitation is an invitation for chaos. Every second of uncertainty is a crack in your armor that others will exploit. The world doesn't reward those who wait for certainty. It rewards those who act with it. When I took the crown of France, I didn't wait for universal approval or perfect timing. I saw the moment, and I seized it with absolute conviction. That's how power is taken. That's how power is held. Remember this, softness doesn't create safety. It creates vulnerability. When you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. When you hedge your decisions, you hedge your power. When you seek consensus, you surrender leadership. Your certainty must become your signature. It must be the thing people feel when you enter a room, the energy they sense in your silence, the force they recognize in your decisions. Because in the end, people don't follow plans. They follow conviction. They don't respect strategies. They respect unwavering certainty. This is your moment to decide. Will you be the one who hesitates, debates, and deliberates while opportunities pass? Or will you be the one who moves with such certainty that others scramble to align themselves with your vision? The choice is yours. But remember, hesitation isn't just a pause in action. It's a surrender of power. When your expectations are high, the weak remove themselves. Let me tell you about the kind of standards that build empires. When I took command of the Army of Italy, I found an undisciplined force led by comfortable men. Within months, those who couldn't meet my standards had either resigned or been replaced. I didn't have to remove them. My standards did it for me. This is the first principle of building fearsome authority. Your standards must be so high that they become a filter. They should act as an invisible barrier that naturally separates those who are committed to excellence from those who merely talk about it. But here's what most don't understand about high standards. They're not just about the tasks you assign or the results you demand. They're about the energy you expect others to bring to every moment. They're about the level of thought, preparation, and presence you require just to be in your orbit. When I reorganized the French education system, I didn't just set academic requirements. I established standards for how teachers carried themselves, how students presented their ideas, how administrators managed their time. Because true standards aren't just about what people do, they're about who people become. Let me share something I observed in building my empire. When your standards are merely high, people will try to negotiate with them. But when your standards are unrelentingly high, when they become part of your very presence, people stop negotiating and start transforming. Think about the last time you were in the presence of someone with truly high standards. Did you find yourself sitting straighter, speaking more precisely, thinking more clearly? That's not coincidence. That's the power of standards that demand excellence without saying a word. Here's what separates meaningful standards from mere rules. Rules tell people what to do, but standards show people who they must become. When I established the Civil Code, I wasn't just creating laws. I was setting standards for how a modern society should function, how citizens should conduct themselves, how justice should be administered. Most leaders make the mistake of setting standards they think others can meet. This is weakness disguised as compassion. Set standards that force people to grow. Set standards that make the mediocre uncomfortable. Set standards that make the comfortable question themselves. But remember this, your standards must first be evident in you. Every detail matters. The way you dress, the way you speak, the way you carry yourself in moments of stress. Your standards must be so deeply ingrained that they become visible in everything you do, everything you are. I'll tell you what I demanded of my marshals. Don't show me effort. Show me excellence. Don't tell me about your challenges. Show me your solutions. Don't explain why something is difficult. Demonstrate why you're the one who can accomplish it. This is the level of standards that creates fear. Not fear of punishment, but fear of falling short. When your standards become your signature, people don't fear your disapproval. They fear disappointing themselves in your presence. Let me share a truth about high standards that most won't tell you. They're not about perfection. They're about progression. When I promoted officers, I didn't choose the ones who never failed. I chose the ones who turned their failures into foundations for future success. Your standards should be like the mountains I crossed to reach Italy, appearing impossible to those who lack vision, but inspiring to those who possess it. They should challenge not just what people can do, but what they believe is possible. Here's what happens when your standards truly become intimidating. The right people begin to seek you out. They're drawn to the challenge, magnetized by the opportunity to prove themselves against a standard that others find frightening. The weak will call your standards unreasonable. They'll say you expect too much, demand too much, push too hard. Good. Let them remove themselves. Let them seek comfort elsewhere. Your purpose isn't to accommodate mediocrity. It's to cultivate excellence. Remember this, the standards you accept become the standards you deserve. When you tolerate mediocrity, you attract more of it. When you demand excellence, you create it. Your standards aren't just a measure of others, they're a measure of you. Set standards that make the average person question their capabilities. Set standards that make the excellent person rise to new heights. Set standards that make your presence both an inspiration and a challenge, because in the end, the fear of failing to meet high standards is what drives people to exceed them. They don't need to see you bleed to know you're human. Let me tell you about the morning of Austerlitz. My soldiers were cold, tired, uncertain. They looked to me for a sign of doubt, a moment of weakness, a glimpse of the weight I carried. They found none, not because I felt no doubt, but because I understood that leadership demands perfect control over what you reveal. This is the first principle of maintaining fear. Your inner state must remain your own. I've seen countless leaders destroy their authority in a single moment of uncalculated vulnerability. They think sharing their doubts makes them relatable. Instead, it makes them replaceable. But here's what most don't understand about showing. No weakness. It's not about being inhuman. It's about being deliberate. Every expression, every gesture, every silence must be chosen. Not natural, not comfortable, but chosen. When I returned from exile to reclaim France, do you think I felt no uncertainty? Do you think I had no moments of doubt? Of course I did. But my soldiers saw only absolute conviction. My allies saw only unwavering confidence. My enemies saw only inevitable advance. Let me share something I learned in the courts of Europe. Power isn't in what you feel, it's in what you show. The most dangerous person in any room isn't the one without fear, but the one who has mastered fear so completely that others can't detect it. Think about the last time you saw someone truly powerful lose their composure. How quickly did their authority diminish? How rapidly did fear turn to contempt? This is why emotional discipline isn't just a virtue. It's a necessity for those who wish to command fear. Most make the mistake of thinking that strength means never feeling weakness. This is childish. True strength is feeling everything: doubt, fear, uncertainty, exhaustion, and revealing nothing. It's maintaining perfect composure while chaos reigns inside. I'll tell you what I discovered leading men into battle. They don't need to see your humanity. They need to see your certainty. They don't need to know your doubts. They need to believe in your vision. They don't need to witness your struggles. They need to trust your strength. Here's the paradox of power that few understand. The more control you have over yourself, the more others feel your humanity, not through emotional displays or moments of weakness, but through the depth of your self-mastery. They sense the power it takes to maintain such perfect control. When you master this level of self-containment, something remarkable happens. People begin to project their own strength onto you. Your silence becomes wisdom. Your stillness becomes strength. Your composure becomes capability. This is how legends are born, not through what you show, but through what you contain. But remember this: controlling what you reveal is not the same as being cold or distant. When I spoke to my soldiers before battle, I showed precisely what would inspire them, no more, no less. Every display of emotion was strategic. Every show of passion was calculated. Most leaders today have been taught that vulnerability equals authenticity. This is the poison that kills authority. Your followers don't need to see your wounds to know you've bled. They don't need to hear your doubts to know you've questioned. They need to see someone who has transformed their struggles into strength. Let me tell you about the power of controlled revelation. When you show emotion rarely, it lands with the force of lightning. When you display anger selectively, it carries the weight of thunder. When you express approval sparingly, it feels like sunlight breaking through clouds. This is the art of emotional discipline, not the absence of feeling, but the perfect control of its expression. Every reaction must be chosen. Every response must be measured. Every display must serve a purpose beyond mere emotional release. Your composure must become your armor. Not rigid, not brittle, but impenetrable. It should be so consistent that any crack would be immediately noticeable, which is precisely why you never show one. Here's what happens when you master this level of self-control. People begin to fear, disappointing you more than they fear your reaction. They begin to measure themselves against your composure. They begin to find their own strength in your example. Remember this: they don't need your vulnerability. They need your victory. They don't need your doubts. They need your direction. They don't need to see you bleed. They need to see you lead. Perfect control over what you reveal isn't just about maintaining fear. It's about maintaining the power to transform others through your example. Let the legend walk ahead of you. Your reputation is not just what people say about you. It's the shadow you cast before you ever enter a room. When I marched across Europe, armies sometimes surrendered before a single shot was fired, not because of my present force, but because of my reputation for inevitable victory. This is the power of a carefully crafted reputation. It fights your battles before you arrive. It negotiates on your behalf while you remain silent. It commands respect while you sleep. But here's what most don't understand about reputation. It must be built deliberately, maintained ruthlessly, and wielded strategically. Let me share something I learned while rising from minor nobility to emperor. Your reputation isn't just built on what you do. It's built on what you allow others to witness. Every public action, every visible decision, every observed response must reinforce the legend you're creating. When I reformed France's legal system, I didn't just change laws, I changed how justice itself was perceived. When I reorganized the education system, I didn't just improve schools, I transformed how knowledge was valued. Your reputation must do more than reflect your actions. It must amplify your impact. Think about the last time you heard someone's name and felt a shift in the room's energy. That's not just reputation, that's power. That's the result of a legend so carefully crafted that it works in your absence. That's the kind of reputation you must build. Most people make the mistake of thinking reputation is about being known. It's not. It's about being known for something specific, something that creates fear through respect, something that commands attention through achievement, something that makes your very name a force to be reckoned with. Here's what separates a powerful reputation from mere fame: consistency. When I won battles, it wasn't enough to simply win. I had to win in a way that reinforced my reputation for strategic brilliance. When I made laws, it wasn't enough to simply rule. I had to rule in a way that reinforced my reputation for visionary leadership. Your reputation must become a weapon so sharp that others feel its edge before you even speak. It should make your enemies reconsider before opposing you. It should make your allies proud to support you. It should make the undecided eager to join you. But remember this: reputation is not about popularity. It's about impact. When I made decisions that others considered harsh, I didn't worry about short-term opinion. I focused on building a reputation for unwavering commitment to excellence, for uncompromising standards, for relentless pursuit of goals. Let me tell you about the power of a well-crafted reputation. It turns your presence into an event. When you walk into a room, people shouldn't just see you. They should feel the weight of every story they've heard, every achievement they know about, every standard you're known for maintaining. Most leaders today worry too much about their image and too little about their impact. They want to be seen as nice instead of being known as effective. They want to be considered friendly instead of being respected as formidable. This is the path to mediocrity, not mastery. Your reputation should be like a well-forged sword, sharp enough to cut through doubt, strong enough to withstand challenge, and balanced enough to serve you in any situation. It should make your enemies pause, your allies stand taller, and the uncommitted reconsider their position. Here's what happens when your reputation truly becomes your sword. Opportunities come to you. Challenges resolve themselves before reaching you. Opposition thinks twice before facing you, not because of what you might do, but because of what you're known for doing. I'll tell you what I told my marshals. Don't just win. Win in a way that makes future victories easier. Don't just succeed. Succeed in a way that makes future success seem inevitable. Don't just achieve. Achieve in a way that makes your name synonymous with excellence. Remember this: your reputation isn't just about the past, it's about the future. It should make people not just remember what you've done, but anticipate what you'll do next. It should not just reflect your achievements, but suggest your potential. It should not just tell your story, but hint at the chapters yet to come. Your reputation must become a force that works while you rest, fights while you wait, and wins while you watch. Because when your legend walks ahead of you, fear follows close behind. Emotion makes noise. Strategy makes moves. Let me tell you about the moment that changed the course of European history. At Austerlitz, my enemies were driven by anger, pride, and the emotional need to crush the upstart who had disrupted their comfortable order. I was driven by pure strategy. They moved their armies with rage. I moved mine like chess pieces. The result? Their emotions led them into a trap that strategy had prepared. This is the fundamental truth about power. Emotion is a luxury that leaders cannot afford. When others are reacting, you must be calculating. When they are feeling, you must be thinking. When they are exploding, you must be plotting. But here's what most don't understand about being strategic. It's not about suppressing emotions. It's about transcending them. I felt every slight, every insult, every challenge to my authority. But I never let those feelings dictate my actions. Instead, I transformed emotional fuel into strategic fire. Think about the last time you made a decision in anger. How many opportunities did you miss while focused on revenge? How many advantages did you surrender while pursuing satisfaction? This is why emotional leadership is weak leadership. It makes you predictable, manipulatable, defeatable. Let me share something I learned while conquering Europe. Your enemies want you to be emotional. They feed you insults hoping for a reaction. They present provocations hoping for response. Why? Because an emotional opponent is a vulnerable opponent. Their feelings become the strings by which they can be pulled. When I negotiated with other monarchs, they often tried to provoke an emotional response. Reminders of my common birth, subtle insults to my legitimacy, challenges to my authority. But they found only strategic silence, calculated responses, moves that served my goals rather than my feelings. Most leaders make the mistake of thinking leadership is about passion. It's not. It's about precision. Passion may start revolutions, but strategy wins them. Passion may inspire armies, but strategy leads them to victory. Passion may set goals, but strategy achieves them. Here's what separates strategic thinking from emotional reaction. Strategic thinking considers not just the next move, but the next 5 moves. Not just the immediate effect, but the chain of effects. Not just what you want to do, but what you need to achieve. I'll tell you what I discovered leading armies. The most dangerous person in any room isn't the one who's most angry, most passionate, or most driven. It's the one who's most calculating. The one who can turn others' emotions into predictable moves in a game they don't even know they're playing. Your strategic thinking must become so habitual that it's your first response to every situation. Before you feel, you must analyze. Before you react, you must calculate. Before you move, you must position. But remember this: being strategic doesn't mean being slow. When I saw an opportunity on the battlefield, I seized it instantly. The difference is that my rapid responses were driven by strategic assessment, not emotional impulse. Every quick decision was part of a larger plan. Most people today have been taught that showing emotion makes them authentic. This is the philosophy of the weak. True power comes from showing only what serves your strategy. Every display of emotion should be a calculated move, every reaction a strategic choice. Let me tell you about the power of strategic silence. When others are shouting their intentions, you should be quietly positioning your forces. When they are broadcasting their moves, you should be masking yours. When they are revealing their emotions, you should be concealing your thoughts. This is how you build fear through strategy. Become the person whose next move cannot be predicted, whose true intentions cannot be read, whose final goal cannot be anticipated. Not because you're mysterious, but because you're strategic. Your strategy should be like a river, appearing calm on the surface while powerful currents move beneath. Your opponents should see only the surface, never the depths of your planning. They should feel the effects of your strategy without ever fully understanding its workings. Here's what happens when you master strategic thinking. People begin to fear your silence more than others' threats. They begin to worry more about what you're not saying than what others are shouting. They begin to sense that while others are playing checkers, you're playing chess. Remember this: emotion may win battles, but strategy wins wars. Emotion may create moments, but strategy creates empires. Emotion may fuel action, but strategy determines victory. Choose now. Will you be the leader who reacts from feeling or the one who acts from strategy? Every extra word weakens your power. In the courts of Europe, I watched men of privilege drone on endlessly, drowning their authority in floods of unnecessary words. Meanwhile, I chose each word like a weapon, each silence like a shield. The result? When I spoke, even whispers carried the weight of cannons. This is the first principle of verbal power. Scarcity creates value. The less you speak, the more weight your words carry. The more selective you are with your speech, the more impact each statement makes. This isn't just about communication, it's about command. Let me share something I learned while rising from obscurity to empire. Words are like currency. The more you put into circulation, the less each one is worth. When you speak constantly, explaining everything, justifying anything, your words become cheap, worthless, ignored. But here's what most don't understand about powerful speech. It's not about being silent, it's about being selective. When I addressed my armies before battle, I didn't give long speeches about glory and duty. I gave them sharp, clear words they could carry into combat like weapons. Think about the last time you heard someone truly powerful speak. Did they ramble? Did they repeat themselves? Did they fill every silence with nervous chatter? No. They chose their words with precision, delivered them with purpose, and let their impact hang in the air. Most people make the mistake of thinking they need to explain themselves constantly. They don't realize that every explanation is a small surrender of authority. Every justification is an admission of doubt. Every excess word is a dilution of power. I'll tell you what I observed in countless negotiations. The one who speaks least often controls the conversation, not through elaborate arguments or lengthy explanations, but through the power of calculated words and strategic silence. Here's what separates powerful speech from mere talking. Powerful speech is intentional. Every word serves a purpose. Every phrase advances an objective. Every statement either commands attention or surrenders it. There is no middle ground. When I issued orders to my marshals, I didn't engage in lengthy discussions about my reasoning. I gave clear, concise commands that left no room for debate. Why? Because debate weakens direction. Discussion dilutes decision. Dialogue delays action. Your words must become like well-aimed artillery, each one striking its target with precision and purpose. No scattershots of nervous chatter, no barrages of pointless explanation, no waste of verbal ammunition on unworthy targets. But remember this, speaking less doesn't mean communicating less. It means communicating with more impact. When you reduce your words, you increase their power. When you eliminate excess, you emphasize importance. When you choose silence, you create anticipation. Most leaders today have been taught that more communication equals better leadership. This is false. Better communication comes from better choice of words, better timing of delivery, better understanding of impact. Quantity diminishes quality. Let me tell you about the power of precise speech. When you eliminate unnecessary words, people stop hearing what you say and start listening for what you mean. They stop processing your language and start absorbing your intent. They stop reacting to your words and start responding to your will. This is how you build fear through speech. Make your words rare enough to be remembered, clear enough to be understood, and powerful enough to be followed. Don't be the leader who fills every silence. Be the one whose words create silence. Your speech should be like a perfectly forged blade. No excess weight, no decorative elements, nothing that doesn't serve its purpose. Every word should cut through confusion. Every phrase should pierce doubt. Every statement should strike with purpose. Here's what happens when you master the art of speaking less. People begin to listen more. They begin to watch for your reactions, rather than waiting for your explanations. They begin to interpret your silence rather than just hearing your words. Remember this, Power doesn't need to explain itself. Authority doesn't need to justify itself. Leadership doesn't need to announce itself. Let your words be few, your meaning clear, and your impact undeniable, because in the realm of power, less speech means more strength. Stillness commands more than shouting ever could. Let me tell you about true power. In the imperial court, I watched men gesture wildly, pace nervously, shift constantly, each movement betraying their weakness. Meanwhile, I stood still as marble, moved with deliberate purpose, and commanded attention without effort. The difference? They were trying to take control of the room. I already owned it. This is the fundamental truth about presence. Stillness is strength. When you understand real power, you realize that movement is often merely compensation for lack of authority. The truly powerful don't need to pace like caged animals. They own their space through pure presence. But here's what most don't understand about controlling a room. It's not about dominating the space physically, it's about commanding it energetically. When I entered a room of generals, many physically larger and more decorated than myself, I didn't need to move to make my presence felt. My stillness spoke louder than their motion. Think about the last time you saw someone with genuine authority. Enter a room. Did they burst in with dramatic flourish? Did they pace to command attention? No. Their mere presence shifted the energy of the space. Their stillness drew all eyes. Their minimal movements carried maximum impact. Let me share something I learned. While rising through the ranks, unnecessary movement is a sign of internal weakness. Every fidget betrays uncertainty. Every nervous gesture reveals doubt. Every excessive movement shows a lack of self-containment. The truly powerful can command attention with absolute stillness. When I held war councils, I didn't pace around the table or gesture dramatically at maps. I stood still, spoke clearly, and let my presence do the work. Why? Because excessive movement disperses power, while stillness concentrates it. Movement distracts from authority, while stillness enhances it. Most people make the mistake of thinking they need to move to be noticed. They don't realize that constant motion makes them background noise, while strategic stillness makes them the center of attention. Power doesn't chase attention, it attracts it. Here's what separates commanding presence from mere physical occupation of space. Intention. Every position you take should be chosen. Every movement should be purposeful. Every moment of stillness should be powerful. There should be nothing accidental about how you occupy space. I'll tell you what I discovered about the power of stillness. When you move less, people notice your movements more. When you gesture rarely, people pay attention to your gestures. When you maintain stillness, people feel the impact of your smallest shift. Your presence must become like a gravitational force, not through effort or action, but through centered, concentrated power. People should feel your presence before they see your movement. They should sense your authority before you demonstrate it. But remember this, stillness isn't about being rigid or frozen. It's about being deliberately contained. Think of a lion, at rest, completely still, yet ready to move with lethal precision at any moment. That's the kind of stillness that commands respect and creates fear. Most leaders today have been taught that dynamic movement shows confidence and authority. This is the behavior of the weak trying to appear strong. True power doesn't need to prove itself through constant motion. It proves itself through controlled stillness. Let me tell you about the psychology of stillness. When you maintain absolute control over your movements, others become acutely aware of their own lack of control. When you remain still with purpose, they become conscious of their own purposeless motion. When you move with intention, they realize how much of their movement is mere nervous energy. This is how you build fear through presence. Become the still point around which others orbit. Become the calm center that makes others aware of their own chaos. Become the controlled force that highlights others' lack of containment. Your stillness should be like the eye of a storm, calm, centered, powerful. Not because you're suppressing energy, but because you're containing it. Not because you're rigid, but because you're controlled. Not because you're weak, but because you're powerful enough to be still. Here's what happens when you master the art of stillness. People begin to adjust themselves to your presence rather than you adjusting to theirs. They begin to feel uncomfortable with their own excessive movement. They begin to sense the power in your contained energy. Remember this, the truly powerful don't need to pace like prisoners in their own space. They don't need to gesture to emphasize their words. They don't need to move to command attention. Let your stillness be your strength, your presence be your power, and your control be your command. The one who seeks least controls the most. Let me tell you about the most powerful position I ever held, not when I was emperor, but when I made others seek my approval without ever asking for theirs. In the courts of Europe, I watched kings and princes chase validation like beggars chasing coins. Meanwhile, I remained the prize to be won, the approval to be earned, the validation others desperately sought. This is the central truth about power. Through validation, the moment you seek approval, you surrender authority. The instant you chase validation, you become the hunter rather than the prize. This is not the position of power, it is the position of weakness. But here's what most don't understand about using approval as power. It's not about being cold or unreachable. It's about being selective. When I praised a general, it wasn't casual appreciation. It was a deliberate conferral of value. When I showed approval, it wasn't common courtesy, it was rare currency. Think about the last time you encountered someone whose approval you genuinely valued. Did they freely give their praise? Did they easily show their appreciation? No. Their approval meant something precisely because it was earned, not given. Their validation carried weight because it was rare, not common. Let me share something I learned while building an empire. People don't value what they don't earn. When you make your approval too accessible, you make it worthless. When you give your validation too freely, you make it meaningless. The harder something is to obtain, the more it's worth. When I chose my marshals, I didn't select those who sought my favor most eagerly. I chose those who proved themselves worthy of my standards. Why? Because those who chase approval will eventually chase it from someone else. Those who earn it through excellence remain loyal to the standard itself. Most people make the mistake of thinking leadership means being approachable and affirming. They don't realize that by trying to be liked, they become common. By trying to be accessible, they become disposable. By trying to be affirming, they become irrelevant. Here's what separates powerful validation from mere praise. Powerful validations is earned, not given. It's achieved, not offered. It's valued because it's scarce, respected because it's genuine, and sought after because it's meaningful. I'll tell you what I observed in every great victory. The soldiers who fought hardest weren't seeking my praise. They were seeking to meet my standards. They weren't trying to make me proud. They were trying to prove themselves worthy. This is the difference between weak leadership and strong authority. Your approval must become like a rare metal, valuable because it's scarce, meaningful because it's earned, respected because it represents genuine achievement. People shouldn't expect your validation. They should aspire to it. But remember this, withholding approval isn't about being cruel. It's about maintaining standards. When I did show appreciation, it was genuine, specific, and tied to excellence. This made my approval something to be earned through performance, not gained through flattery. Most leaders today have been taught that they should be generous with praise, liberal with validation, and constant with affirmation. This is the path to becoming meaningless. When everything is praised, nothing is valuable. When everyone is validated, no one is exceptional. Let me tell you about the power of withheld approval. When you make your validation rare, people begin to value it more. When you make your praise earned, people begin to work for it harder. When you make your approval meaningful, people begin to change their behavior to obtain it. This is how you build fear through validation. Become the one whose approval carries weight. Become the one whose recognition means something. Become the one whose validation changes status, not through cruelty, but through genuine, earned appreciation of excellence. Your approval should be like a precious metal, valuable because it's rare, sought after because it's genuine, treasured because it means something. People shouldn't just want your approval, they should want to be worthy of it. Here's what happens when you master the art of selective validation. People begin to measure themselves by your standards rather than their own. They begin to value your approval more than general praise. They begin to fear losing your respect more than losing your favor. Remember this, the truly powerful don't seek validation, they grant it. They don't chase approval, they confer it. They don't need to be liked, they need to be respected. Let your approval be earned, not given. Let your validation be achieved, not offered. Let your respect be a prize, not a participation trophy. The more you explain, the less they believe you. Let me tell you about the day I took the crown of France. I didn't call a committee to explain my reasoning. I didn't justify my actions to those who opposed me. I moved with such decisive clarity that explanation became unnecessary. Those who understood power recognized its natural progression. Those who didn't were too late to resist it. This is the fundamental truth about power. Explanation is weakness disguised as transparency. Every time you justify a decision, you open it to debate. Every time you explain your reasoning, you invite challenge. Every time you defend your choice, you diminish its authority. But here's what most don't understand about avoiding explanation. It's not about being mysterious. It's about being decisive. When I issued commands to my armies, I didn't attach essays explaining my strategy. I gave clear, direct orders that assumed their own legitimacy. The result? Swift, unquestioning execution. Think about the last time you saw someone truly powerful make a decision. Did they follow it with lengthy explanations? Did they justify their choice to every questioner? No. They decided, directed, and moved forward, letting their results speak louder than their reasons ever could. Let me share something I learned while building an empire. The need to explain often masks a deeper need for approval. When you justify your decisions, you're not really explaining. You're seeking permission after the fact. This is not the behavior of a leader. It's the habit of the uncertain. When I reorganized the French government, I didn't publish manifestos explaining every change. I implemented systems so effective that they justified themselves through results. Why? Because true power doesn't explain itself. It proves itself through impact. Most people make the mistake of thinking leadership means bringing everyone along through careful explanation. They don't realize that every justification is a small crack in their authority. Every explanation an invitation to doubt their judgment. Here's what separates powerful decisions from weak ones. Powerful decisions stand on their own. They don't need the crutch of explanation or the shield of justification. They are clear, direct, and self-evident through their execution and results. I'll tell you what I discovered about the psychology of command. When you explain a decision, you transform it from a direction into a discussion. When you justify your choices, you turn commands into conversations. When you defend your thinking, you invite others to challenge it. Your decisions must become like lightning, clear, striking, and undebatable. People shouldn't be asking why you decided something. They should be focused on how to execute it. They shouldn't be questioning your reasoning. They should be implementing your direction. But remember this, refusing to explain isn't about being arbitrary or capricious. It's about understanding that your track record of results speaks louder than any explanation could. When you consistently make decisions that lead to victory, explanation becomes unnecessary. Most leaders today have been taught that they need to be transparent, collaborative, and explanatory. This is the philosophy of the weak. True power doesn't need to explain itself because its results speak for themselves. True authority doesn't need to justify itself because its impact is self-evident. Let me tell you about the power of unexplained action. When you stop explaining your decisions, people stop debating them and start implementing them. When you cease justifying your choices, people stop questioning them and start executing them. When you quit defending your thinking, people stop challenging it and start aligning with it. This is how you build fear through decisive action. Become the leader who decides with such clarity that explanation feels redundant. Become the authority whose choices are so clearly effective that justification seems unnecessary. Become the power whose impact is so evident that defense becomes pointless. Your decisions should be like natural laws, operating with such consistent effectiveness that questioning them seems foolish. People shouldn't need to understand your reasoning. They should trust your judgment. They shouldn't require your justification. They should respect your results. Here's what happens when you master the art of undebated decision-making. People stop asking why and start asking how. They stop questioning your choices and start executing your vision. They stop needing explanations and start trusting your judgment. Remember this: the truly powerful don't explain themselves. They prove themselves through results. They don't justify their decisions. They let their success speak for itself. They don't defend their choices. They let their impact silence doubt. Let your actions explain themselves. Let your results justify your decisions. Let your success be your defense. You cannot demand more from others than you demand from yourself. Let me tell you about the nights before battle, when my soldiers would see their emperor sleeping on the ground, sharing their discomfort, facing their challenges. I didn't demand their sacrifice from a distant palace. I demanded it while standing beside them in the mud. This wasn't strategy. This was the foundation of true power, personal standards that exceed what you demand from others. This is the immutable law of leadership. Your standards for yourself must be so high that your demands of others seem reasonable by comparison. When I pushed my armies to march 40 miles in a day, they knew I had marched 50. When I demanded precision in battle, they knew I had spent countless hours studying every detail of warfare. But here's what most don't understand about self-discipline. It's not about perfection, it's about progression. Every day I demanded more from myself than I had the day before. Every victory set the standard higher. Every achievement became the new baseline. This relentless self-elevation created an aura of unstoppable momentum that others feared and respected. Think about the last time you encountered someone with truly high personal standards. Did they need to shout to be heard? Did they need to threaten to be followed? No. Their own example did what no command could achieve. Their personal excellence became the standard others measured themselves against. Let me share something I learned while building an empire. Authority flows naturally to those who hold themselves to impossible standards. When your personal discipline becomes legendary, your right to demand excellence becomes unquestionable. When you visibly push yourself beyond normal limits, your expectation that others do the same becomes natural law. When I reformed France's educational system, I first educated myself in every subject I sought to transform. When I rewrote the legal code, I studied law until I could debate with lifetime jurists. Why? Because demanding excellence without embodying it is the hollow shout of a weak leader trying to sound strong. Most people make the mistake of thinking leadership is about setting standards for others. They don't realize that true power comes from setting standards for yourself that make your expectations of others seem modest by comparison. Your personal excellence should make your demands feel reasonable. Here's what separates true authority from mere position. True authority is earned through visible excellence. When I demanded courage from my soldiers, they knew I had charged into battle. When I demanded sacrifice, they knew I had given more. When I demanded loyalty, they knew I had proven mine. I'll tell you what I discovered about the psychology of leadership. People don't follow orders. They follow examples. They don't rise to your expectations. They rise to your demonstrations. They don't meet your standards. They aspire to your visible achievement. Your self-discipline must become so legendary that it creates its own gravitational pull. People shouldn't just follow your orders, they should be inspired by your example. They shouldn't just meet your standards, they should be transformed by your visible excellence. But remember this, ruthless self-discipline isn't about showing off, it's about setting the baseline. When I worked through the night studying maps and reports, it wasn't for display. It was because I refused to demand preparation from my generals that I hadn't exceeded myself. Most leaders today think they can demand excellence without embodying it. They think their position gives them the right to expect what they don't demonstrate. This is the delusion that creates weak leadership and rebellious followers. Let me tell you about the power of personal standards. When you visibly hold yourself to impossible standards, people feel ashamed to give you anything less than their best. When you demonstrably push yourself beyond normal limits, people feel compelled to exceed their own. When you evidently demand more from yourself than anyone else could, people strive to prove themselves worthy of your example. This is how you build fear through personal excellence, become the standard that others measure themselves against, become the example that makes mediocrity uncomfortable, become the baseline that makes average effort feel inadequate. Your personal standards should be like the peaks of the Alps, so high that they make others' mountains look like hills. People shouldn't just respect your position, they should be in awe of your personal excellence. They shouldn't just follow your orders, they should aspire to your example. Here's what happens when you master the art of self-discipline. People stop resenting your demands and start respecting your standards. They stop questioning your authority and start studying your methods. They stop resisting your leadership and start emulating your excellence. Remember this, you cannot lead from behind, and you cannot demand from comfort what you haven't earned through sacrifice. Let your personal standards be so high that your demands feel reasonable. Let your visible excellence be so consistent that your authority becomes unquestionable. Let your self-discipline be so legendary that your leadership becomes natural law. They should fear disappointing you more than disobeying you. Let me tell you about true power. In my armies, I never needed to threaten punishment for failure. My officers and soldiers feared something far more potent than physical consequences. They feared losing my trust. They dreaded seeing disappointment in my eyes more than they feared any formal reprimand. This is the apex of authority, when consequences don't need to be spoken because they're felt in the air like approaching thunder, when people modify their behavior not from fear of punishment, but from fear of falling short of your standards, when your disapproval carries more weight than any formal sanction. But here's what most don't understand about consequences. Explicit threats are the weapons of the weak. When you have to tell someone what will happen if they fail, you've already revealed your own lack of true power. Real authority doesn't threaten, it implies. It doesn't warn, it suggests through silence. Think about the last time you truly feared disappointing someone. Was it because they threatened you? Or was it because their good opinion meant so much that losing it was unthinkable? This is the difference between crude power and true authority. One threatens, the other inspires dread through approval withheld. Let me share something I learned while commanding armies. The most powerful consequence isn't what you'll do to someone, it's what you'll think of them. When my generals knew that failure meant losing my confidence, they achieved the impossible. Not because I threatened them, but because they couldn't bear the weight of my disappointment. When I chose my marshals, I never listed what would happen if they failed. I didn't need to. They understood that my trust, once lost, was nearly impossible to regain. This unspoken understanding drove them to excellence far more effectively than any explicit threat could have. Most people make the mistake of thinking power comes from the ability to punish. They don't realize that true power comes from the ability to withdraw approval. When your good opinion becomes valuable enough, its loss becomes the ultimate consequence, one that never needs to be stated. Here's what separates powerful consequences from mere threats. Powerful consequences are understood without being explained. They hover in the air during every interaction. They color every decision. They influence every action, not through fear of punishment, but through fear of falling from grace. I'll tell you what I discovered about the psychology of consequences. When people fear punishment, they do just enough to avoid it. But when they fear disappointing you, they strive for excellence. When they fear sanctions, they become calculating. When they fear losing your respect, they become transformative. Your disapproval must become like winter in Russia, something everyone knows exists and no one wants to face. People shouldn't worry about what you'll do to them. They should worry about who they'll become in your eyes if they fail. But remember this, unspoken consequences aren't about being cruel or capricious. They're about creating a standard so clear, so respected, that falling short of it becomes its own punishment. When I showed disappointment in an officer, it wasn't personal. It was a reflection of their failure to meet the standard they'd agreed to uphold. Most leaders today think they need to spell out consequences in detailed policies and procedures. They don't understand that the more you specify consequences, the more you limit their power. The unspoken consequence can take any form in the mind of the one who fears it. Let me tell you about the power of implied consequences. When you never threaten but always follow through, people begin to fear possibilities more than specifics. When you never warn but always notice, people begin to dread your attention more than your action. When you never announce punishment but always remember failure, people begin to fear your memory more than your might. This is how you build fear, through unspoken consequences. Become the person whose disappointment hurts more than any punishment. Become the authority whose disapproval changes status more than any sanction. Become the leader whose lost trust is feared more than any threat. Your consequences should be like gravity, an unseen force that everyone knows exists and no one can escape. People shouldn't need to be told what will happen if they fail. They should feel it in every interaction, sense it in every silence, see it in every glance. Here's what happens when you master the art of unspoken consequences. People begin to regulate their own behavior to maintain your good opinion. They begin to push themselves to avoid your disappointment. They begin to fear letting themselves down in your eyes more than any punishment you could devise. Remember this, the truly powerful don't need to threaten consequences. Their presence implies them. They don't need to warn of failure. Their standards predict it. They don't need to announce punishment. Their disappointment delivers it. Let your approval be so valuable that its loss becomes the ultimate consequence. Let your standards be so clear that falling short becomes its own punishment. Let your trust be so precious that losing it becomes the fate everyone fears. Once they know your moves, you've already lost. Let me tell you about the art of victory. At Austerlitz, my enemies thought they knew my strategy. They predicted my movements. Based on past battles, anticipated my tactics based on previous encounters. But what they studied was merely the surface. The real strategy remained hidden until it was too late for them to counter it. This is the fundamental truth about power. Transparency is a trap. The moment others understand your methods, they can predict your moves. The instant they grasp your strategy, they can undermine your power. The second they see your pattern, they can prepare their defense. But here's what most don't understand about strategic secrecy. It's not about being mysterious. It's about being unpredictable. When I led armies across Europe, I didn't just hide my plans. I created false ones. I didn't just mask my intentions. I made every movement suggest multiple possibilities. Think about the last time you were truly outmaneuvered by someone. Was it because their strategy was superior? Or was it because you never saw their real strategy until it was too late? This is the difference between tactical thinking and strategic mastery. One is visible, the other remains hidden until the moment of victory. Let me share something I learned while conquering nations. The most dangerous strategy isn't the most brilliant one. It's the one that remains invisible until it's already succeeded. When my enemies thought I would march east, I moved west. When they expected a frontal assault, I attacked from behind. Why? Because predictability is death in both war and power. When I negotiated with other rulers, I never revealed my true objectives. The goals I spoke about were rarely the ones I pursued. The concerns I expressed were seldom the ones that truly motivated me. This wasn't deception. It was strategy in its purest form. Most people make the mistake of thinking strategy should be clear and straightforward. They don't realize that every strategy you reveal becomes a weapon that can be used against you. Every pattern you display becomes a weakness that can be exploited. Every method you explain becomes a limitation that can be circumvented. Here's what separates strategic genius from mere tactical competence. Strategic genius remains invisible until it's irreversible. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't reveal its workings. It doesn't explain its methods. It simply succeeds while others are still trying to understand what happened. I'll tell you what I discovered about the psychology of strategy. People fear what they don't understand more than what they do. They respect what they can't predict more than what they can anticipate. They submit to what they can't counter more than what they can resist. Your strategy must become like the wind, invisible yet undeniable in its effects. People shouldn't see your methods. They should only witness your results. They shouldn't understand your approach. They should only experience its success. But remember this: strategic secrecy isn't about random action or chaos. It's about deliberate unpredictability. Every move should suggest multiple possibilities. Every action should create multiple interpretations. Every decision should generate multiple theories about your true intentions. Most leaders today have been taught to be transparent about their methods, clear about their objectives, open about their strategies. This is the path to becoming predictable, counterable, defeatable. True power maintains its mystery even in its moment of triumph. Let me tell you about the power of strategic obscurity. When people can't predict your moves, they can't prepare their defenses. When they can't understand your methods, they can't develop countermeasures. When they can't see your strategy, they can't prevent your victory. This is how you build fear through strategic mystery. Become the leader whose next move cannot be anticipated. Become the force whose methods cannot be mapped. Become the power whose strategy remains hidden even in its moment of success. Your strategy should be like the depths of the ocean, visible on the surface but concealing countless currents beneath. People shouldn't just wonder what you'll do next. They should realize that by the time they figure it out, it will be too late. Here's what happens when you master the art of strategic secrecy. People stop trying to counter your moves and start trying to decipher them. They stop attempting to resist your strategy and start struggling to understand it. They stop fighting your power and start fearing its unpredictability. Remember this: the truly powerful don't reveal their methods. They demonstrate their results. They don't explain their strategy. They execute it. They don't display their power. They deploy it. Let your success be visible while your strategy remains hidden. Let your impact be clear while your methods remain mysterious. Let your victory be undeniable while your approach remains unpredictable. The more intense the moment, the calmer you must become. Let me tell you about the morning of Marengo when defeat seemed certain. My army was scattered, the Austrians were advancing, and my generals were panicking. But in that moment of chaos, I became utterly still. As the pressure mounted, my mind became clearer. As the crisis deepened, my calm became deeper. This wasn't just composure, it was power in its purest form. This is the ultimate truth about pressure. It doesn't reveal character, it reveals mastery. When others crack under pressure, you must become more composed. When others rush in panic, you must move with deliberate precision. When others lose clarity, you must find perfect focus. But here's what most don't understand about pressure. It's not your enemy, it's your ally. Every crisis is an opportunity to demonstrate mastery. Every pressure point is a chance to show what separates you from ordinary leaders. Every moment of stress is a stage on which to perform your signature act. Think about the last time you saw someone truly powerful handle a crisis. Did they match the energy of the chaos around them? Did they mirror the panic of their subordinates? No. They became the eye of the storm, the point of perfect calm around which the chaos spun. Let me share something I learned while facing the combined armies of Europe. Pressure doesn't break true power, it reveals it, when everyone else was losing their heads. My calm became my signature. When others were overwhelmed by circumstances, my composure became my brand. When others were scattered by stress, my focus became my legend. When I faced the coalition at Leipzig, the largest battle Europe had ever seen, my officers marveled at my tranquility. Why? Because I had learned that calm is not the absence of pressure, it's the mastery of it. Composure is not the lack of stress, it's the conquest of it. Most people make the mistake of thinking pressure requires an equal response, matching intensity with intensity, stress with stress, urgency with urgency. They don't realize that true power comes from meeting pressure with its opposite, chaos with calm, crisis with composure, panic with precision. Here's what separates masters of pressure from its victims. Masters don't resist pressure. They absorb it. They don't fight stress. They transform it. They don't avoid crisis. They use it to demonstrate their exceptional nature. I'll tell you what I discovered about the psychology of pressure. People don't follow those who match their panic. They follow those who transcend it. They don't respect those who share their stress. They respect those who seem immune to it. They don't trust those who mirror their chaos. They trust those who control it. Your response to pressure must become your signature trait, the thing people remember long after the crisis has passed. They shouldn't just recall what you did, they should remember how you did it. They shouldn't just know that you succeeded. They should be in awe of your composure while doing it. But remember this, pressure mastery isn't about being emotionless. It's about being in complete control of your emotions. When I made decisions that would reshape Europe, I felt the weight of every choice. But I never let that weight control my responses or cloud my judgment. Most leaders today think they need to show they feel the pressure to appear human. They don't understand that humanity is proven through results, not through shared stress. True leadership isn't about feeling pressure with others, it's about transcending it for them. Let me tell you about the power of pressure mastery. When you remain calm in chaos, people begin to believe you can see something they can't. When you maintain composure in crisis, they begin to trust that you know something they don't. When you stay focused under fire, they begin to feel that you understand something they can't grasp. This is how you build fear through pressure mastery. Become the person whose calm unnerves others. Become the leader whose composure makes others question their own reactions. Become the force whose focus in crisis becomes legendary. Your handling of pressure should be like a master conductor in a storm, while everything around you crashes and booms. Your movements become more precise, your control more evident, your mastery more undeniable. Here's what happens when you master pressure. People stop watching the crisis and start watching you. They stop focusing on the problem and start studying your response. They stop feeling the pressure and start following your lead. Remember this, true power isn't shown in moments of ease. It's revealed under pressure. True mastery isn't proven when things are simple. It's demonstrated when everything is at stake. True leadership isn't displayed in calm waters. It's exhibited in the heart of the storm. Let pressure become your stage. Let crisis become your spotlight. Let stress become your servant in showing others exactly who you are. The closer they feel to you, the less they fear you. Let me tell you about power's greatest illusion. In the courts of Europe, I watched rulers destroy their authority by trying to be loved. They shared their doubts, revealed their weaknesses, tried to seem approachable. And in doing so, they transformed themselves from forces to be reckoned with into people to be manipulated. This is the iron law of power. Distance creates mystery, and mystery creates fear. The moment people think they understand you, they stop fearing you. The instant they feel close to you, they stop respecting you. The second they think they know you, they stop following you. But here's what most don't understand about emotional distance. It's not about being cold, it's about being unknowable. When I led armies, I didn't avoid all connection with my soldiers. I created precisely the connection I wanted them to have, with my strength, not my weakness, with my vision, not my doubts, with my expectations, not my fears. Think about, though, last time you truly feared someone's disapproval. Was it someone who shared their vulnerabilities with you? Someone who tried to be your friend? No. It was someone who maintained their mystery, someone whose inner thoughts remained their own, someone whose true opinions you could never quite be sure of. Let me share something I learned while rising. From obscurity to empire, every time you try to be approachable, you become accessible. Every time you try to be relatable, you become common. Every time you try to be understood, you become predictable. These are all deaths of power. When I took the crown of France, I didn't try to make the people love me. I made them respect me. I didn't try to make my generals like me. I made them fear disappointing me. I didn't try to make my allies understand me. I made them need me. Most people make the mistake of thinking leadership requires connection. They don't realize that true power requires distance, not physical distance, but psychological distance, not emotional coldness, but emotional elevation, not absence, but mystery. Here's what separates powerful presence from mere popularity. Powerful presence maintains its distance even in proximity. It creates awe even in familiarity. It commands respect even in regular interaction. There is no moment when the mask slips, no time when the mystery fades. I'll tell you what I discovered about the psychology of distance. People don't follow those they understand. They follow those they can't quite figure out. They don't respect those they feel equal to. They respect those who remain just out of reach. They don't fear those they know. They fear those they can never quite know. Your presence must become like a mountain peak, visible to all but reached by few. People shouldn't feel they know you. They should feel they glimpse you. They shouldn't think they understand you. They should know they never quite will. But remember this, maintaining distance isn't about being isolated, it's about controlling access. When I dined with my marshals, I didn't avoid conversation. I controlled it. When I met with my ministers, I didn't avoid interaction. I directed it. Every point of contact was a chance to deepen the mystery, not dispel it. Most leaders today have been taught that they need to be authentic, transparent, accessible. This is the philosophy that turns lions into house cats. True power doesn't seek to be understood. It seeks to be effective. It doesn't seek to be known. It seeks to be respected. Let me tell you about the power of psychological distance. When people can't quite reach you, they never stop trying. When they can't quite understand you, they never stop watching. When they can't quite know you, they never stop wondering. This constant effort to understand you becomes its own form of power. This is how you build fear through distance. Become the leader who remains unknowable even when present. Become the authority who maintains mystery even in daily interaction. Become the force that others can observe but never quite comprehend. Your distance should be like the horizon, always visible, never reachable. People shouldn't feel they know you. They should feel they serve you. They shouldn't think they understand you. They should know they follow you. They shouldn't believe they've reached you. They should always be striving to. Here's what happens when you master the art of distance. People stop trying to relate to you and start trying to prove themselves to you. They stop attempting to understand you and start working to impress you. They stop seeking connection and start seeking approval. Remember this, the truly powerful don't need to be understood. They need to be followed. They don't need to be liked. They need to be respected. They don't need to be close. They need to be feared. Let your distance be your power. Let your mystery be your strength. Let your Unknowability be your authority. They may not admit it, but they model themselves after you. Let me tell you about the true measure of power. When I created the Civil Code, I didn't just write laws, I reshaped how people thought about justice itself. When I reorganized education, I didn't just build schools, I transformed how generations would think about learning. My greatest victory wasn't in making people follow my rules. It was in making them internalize my standards. This is the ultimate expression of power, becoming the standard against which others measure themselves. Not through force, not through decree, but through the undeniable example of excellence that burns itself into their minds and reshapes their very conception of what's possible. But here's what most don't understand about becoming the standard. It's not about being perfect, it's about being undeniable. When I led armies, my soldiers didn't just follow my orders, they began to think like me. They started to see battlefields as I saw them. They began to move with the precision I demanded. They transformed themselves in my image, not because I commanded it, but because excellence demands imitation. Think about someone who fundamentally changed how you see your field, your work, your potential. Did they do it by telling you to change? No, they did it by demonstrating a level of excellence so compelling that it rewrote your understanding of what's possible. This is the difference between authority and influence. One commands change, the other inspires transformation. Let me share something I learned while building an empire. True power isn't in making people obey you, it's in making them want to be you. When my officers began carrying themselves differently, speaking more precisely, thinking more strategically, it wasn't because I ordered it. It was because I had become the standard they measured themselves against. When I created institutions across Europe, I didn't just establish rules, I established standards that outlive me. Why? Because I didn't just tell people what to do, I showed them what excellence looked like. I didn't just demand performance, I demonstrated mastery. I didn't just expect greatness, I embodied it. Most people make the mistake of thinking leadership is about giving directions. They don't realize that true power comes from becoming the direction itself, the North Star by which others navigate their own journey toward excellence. Here's what separates standards from rules. Rules can be followed without transformation. Standards require you to become something more. When I set standards for my empire, I wasn't just creating guidelines, I was creating aspirations. I was showing people not just what to do, but who to become. I'll tell you what I discovered about the psychology of excellence. People don't just imitate what you tell them to do, they imitate who you are. They don't just follow your instructions, they absorb your standards. They don't just obey your commands, they internalize your excellence. Your presence must become like fire, something that transforms whatever it touches. People shouldn't just follow your orders. They should find themselves unconsciously adopting your standards. They shouldn't just do what you say. They should find themselves thinking as you think. But remember this, becoming the standard isn't about creating copies. It's about inspiring elevation. When my generals began to think strategically, each did it in his own way. When my administrators began to demand excellence, each expressed it through his own style. I didn't want duplicates. I wanted elevated versions of themselves. Most leaders today think their job is to manage performance. They don't understand that true power comes from transforming the very standards by which performance is measured. Don't tell people how to succeed. Become their definition of success. Let me tell you about the power of becoming the standard. When you embody excellence so completely that it becomes infectious, people begin to measure themselves against you, whether they want to or not. They begin to see their own actions through the lens of your standards. They begin to judge their own performance against your example. This is how you build fear through standards, become so excellent that mediocrity becomes uncomfortable in your presence, become so precise that sloppiness becomes embarrassing around you, become so disciplined that lack of control becomes shameful near you. Your standard should be like the sun, not something people look at directly, but something by which they see everything else. They shouldn't just know your standards. They should find themselves unable to ignore them. They shouldn't just understand your excellence. They should find themselves measured by it. Here's what happens when you truly become the standard. People begin to predict what you would think before you speak. They begin to adjust their work before you review it. They begin to elevate their performance before you demand it. Not because you force them, but because your standard has become part of how they think. Remember this: the truly powerful don't just set standards, they become them. They don't just demand excellence, they embody it. They don't just expect transformation, they inspire it. Let your excellence be so undeniable that it rewrites what others think is possible. Let your standard be so clear that it becomes the lens through which others see their own potential. Let your mastery be so complete that it becomes the measure against which others judge themselves. When your name lives in their mind, you've already won. Let me tell you about the ultimate victory. When I was exiled to Elba, something remarkable happened. My presence continued to rule France in my absence. My enemies couldn't sleep peacefully because they knew I was still alive. My supporters couldn't accept anyone else because they measured every leader against my standard. I had become more than a ruler. I had become a shadow in every mind, a whisper in every conversation, a presence that couldn't be erased. This is the final stage of power, when your physical presence becomes almost unnecessary because your psychological presence is complete. When people feel your judgment even in your absence, when they measure their choices against your standards even when you're not there to impose them. But here's what most don't understand about becoming a permanent presence. It's not about what you do, it's about what you represent. When I shaped France, I didn't just change laws and institutions. I became the embodiment of ambition, of excellence, of transformative power. I became an idea that couldn't be exiled, a standard that couldn't be diminished, a presence that couldn't be eliminated. Think about someone whose opinion still influences your decisions long after they've gone. Someone whose standards you still measure yourself against. Someone whose judgment you still consider even when they're not there to give it. That's not influence. That's psychological dominance. Let me share something I learned about lasting power. Physical authority ends at the reach of your arm, but psychological authority has no limits. When my soldiers marched, they didn't just follow orders, they asked themselves what I would expect. When my administrators governed, they didn't just apply rules, they imposed my standards. I had become the voice in their minds. When I returned from Elba, armies sent to stop me joined me instead. Why? Not because of my physical presence. They surrendered to my psychological presence long before they saw me. They had been measuring their current leaders against my standard and found them wanting. Most people make the mistake of thinking power is about controlling actions. They don't realize that true power is about inhabiting thoughts. When you become the standard by which people judge themselves, the voice they hear in moments of decision, the presence they feel in moments of choice, that's when your power becomes complete. Here's what separates temporary authority from permanent power. Temporary authority ends when you leave the room. Permanent power continues to shape decisions, influence choices, and maintain standards long after you're gone. It's not about being present. It's about becoming unforgettable. I'll tell you what I discovered about psychological dominance. People don't just remember what you did, they internalize who you are. They don't just recall your orders, they absorb your standards. They don't just follow your rules, they adopt your way of thinking. Your presence must become like gravity, an invisible force that shapes everything within its reach. People shouldn't just remember your commands. They should feel your standards in every decision. They shouldn't just recall your rules, they should hear your voice in every choice. But remember this: becoming a permanent presence isn't about fear alone. It's about becoming inescapable. When my enemies plotted against me, they couldn't escape thinking about how I would respond. When my allies made plans they couldn't avoid considering what I would expect. I wasn't just in their minds. I was part of how their minds worked. Most leaders today think about the immediate impact of their authority. They don't understand that true power comes from becoming a permanence, part of how people think, decide, and judge themselves and others. Don't just occupy their thoughts. Become part of their thinking. Let me tell you about the power of psychological presence. When you become the standard people can't ignore, the voice they can't silence, the presence they can't escape, you achieve something beyond authority. You achieve immortality, not of the body but of influence, not of physical presence but of psychological impact. This is how you build fear that lasts. Become the measure against which people automatically judge themselves. Become the standard they can't help but consider. Become the presence they feel, even in your absence, not through force, but through excellence so complete it burns itself into their minds. Your presence should be like a shadow that never leaves, not because it follows them, but because it lives within them. They shouldn't just remember you, they should find themselves unable to forget you. They shouldn't just recall your standards, they should find themselves unable to ignore them. Here's what happens when you achieve true psychological dominance. People begin to feel your judgment even when you're not there to give it. They begin to hear your voice even when you're not there to speak. They begin to measure themselves against your standards even when you're not there to impose them. Remember this, the truly powerful don't just command obedience, they inhabit thoughts. They don't just demand respect, they become inescapable. They don't just exercise authority, they achieve permanence. Let your presence become so complete that it survives your absence. Let your standard become so clear that it guides decisions you'll never see. Let your influence become so profound that it shapes choices you'll never know about.